Well, hello, Ashley. We finally made it on.
Yes, we
We,
did.
wow. Like, Spirit really has a way of getting us ready and primed and prepped and ready to go, don't they?
Oh my goodness. I'm glad it usually ends in laughter, versus
Yes.
like crying.
It's just not worth it otherwise. Oh my
Oh
God.
my,
Well, we sort
yeah.
of took in impromptu hiatus for what, a month and
hmm
a half or so? And
Yeah.
it wasn't by choice, it was just more or less what kind of happened.
hmm
I know my thing was I was being kind of pulled to back and do a lot of reflections and a lot of
mm
resting and taking care of myself and my family and taking stuff, around my house and trying to like get the energy, the momentum ready for the coming year
hmm
of 2025, which I can't believe we're here, but we're
Oh my
here.
gosh, I know.
Yeah. It's so good to see your face. It's been too long.
It has been, yes. But yeah, like you said, I mean, just the holiday season was just so crazy.
Yeah.
For me at least, I worked, which was kind of a bummer, and I did not go home for the holidays, which is also kind of a bummer. So I know, you had mentioned that you kind of went into hermit mode and spent a lot of time with your family. You were taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
care of things around the house. Um, I spent a lot of time grieving, and I know that's today's topic, and I think that's a very good way for us to kind of slide into this topic of conversation.
Yeah.
And for all of our listeners out there, we struggled, I think, 3 times to try to start this
Oh my
recording
God.
on grief. And we had a very heavy conversation before jumping on, and Spirit was like, no, no, no. Like, it's already a heavy topic. You guys need to be laughing and bringing light to this topic
Yeah.
versus it being like doom and gloom, like people kind of make it out to be. But yeah,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time being a hermit. I kind of feel like I stopped talking to a lot of people and I just kind of stayed by myself. I stayed in my own lane, energetic wise. I do customer service for work, so I spend a lot of time with people and I go into hospitals and things like that. So there's a lot of energies around me and just the holiday season can always be heavy. So I know I did
Yeah.
that and
I think
so.
it's a natural process of moving forward from
hmm
life as we knew it or know it, or,
Yeah.
the chance of trying to, I know you've had a significant loss in 2024 or
Yeah.
2023.
Yeah, 2023 was when the loss happened, but I mean, I had
Yeah.
from even that time, I've had different aspects of loss happen in 2024. That kind of ties
Yes.
into everything, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it takes a while to learn who we are
Woo.
separate from those losses. I mean,
hmm
grief it can come in any form. It could be from a job loss. It could
hmm
be from like a loss of a loved one. It can be, and I think you had mentioned in the other podcast we tried to record was just a loss of a friend or a relationship or
Yeah.
a car even. That's
Yep.
what it was, a car. And it can come in many different forms. And then you have to
hmm
relearn who are you without this job or without that
hmm
person or other, and I think that what I have come across with a lot of people who have come to me for services
hmm
was how do they move forward without the guilt,
mm
without the feelings of, well, who am I without this
Yeah.
or person or car, even a car defines you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For
In
some
some
people,
ways,
yes. Yep.
yeah, so it's very hard to go through the holidays and be merry and happy and all
hmm
these things without knowing what's coming, what's next for you, or something like, you know what I mean, or
Yeah,
without
yeah.
knowing who you are, or without these things.
Yeah, like how can you move on? How can life be the same if I have this loss in my life? I can kind of jump in and say I definitely felt that way. I'm kind of even moving through that right now. For those who may or may not know that's listening. My background is occupational therapy, and I worked as a therapist in a few different settings, and I loved it. And I truly, like, to my core, believed like I would always be an OT, and this was what I was meant to do. But my biggest driving factor specifically was helping my family out, and my grandparents were the inspiration for me going into OT because originally I wanted to be a nurse and then I wanted to be a physical therapist. But then I learned you had to like touch feet, and like my grandpa had the most horrific looking feet. Like as a child, I was terrified of
So,
feet. No, it's he knew it too. So like I wanted to be a physical therapist so bad. I worked in a physical therapy clinic for a very long time. I was like, oh, it's so cool to see them, help these people. And then I asked my boss at the time, I was like, hey, you know, I see that you guys work with like a lot of feet and ankles. Can I just be like, I don't
no,
want to do that? And they said, no, you definitely like cannot discriminate against body parts. So I was like, well, then OT it is because because I can't touch feet,
that is
So
hilarious.
I
Yes,
yeah, I
yes,
always said that my grandparents were like the reason why, because I wanted, like the way that I have seen the medical field over the last few years, like helping take care of my grandparents, it's been interesting. And now that I'm out of the game, it's also very interesting. And I'm just trying to figure out like what do I want to do with my life? I don't feel called to go back into OT in the traditional route. I feel very called to do something different. And so I'm struggling with like my identity that I created around being an OT. And so now, going into this year of things ending and new things coming to fruition and things like that. Like I'm grieving my experience of being an OT and like all the hard work I did to get that piece of paper and to do all those things. But I mean, I had a great experience. I definitely still would go back. I don't feel the need to go back. I feel
no,
very called to do something different. So like that's like a huge thing that I've been grieving like throughout 2024, and now I kind of feel good where I'm at now. So like that's an aspect of grief, to kind of touch on. It doesn't have to be a loss of a loved one, but
no, yeah, and it's just, again, trying to redefine who we are
mm-hmm.
going forward, and how do we go about this, and how do we,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the things that I have come across with the guilt of being
Oh,
able to move
yes.
forward, and it's not like the past didn't exist. It's not like the past never happened. What the past did, losses included, it brought
Mm-hmm.
you to this point for growth, for acceptance, for
Expansion.
being
Yep.
expansion, open-minded, open heart. Just be like, huh, that was an interesting journey. Now I'm ready for the next chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's honoring that grief too,
Yep.
honoring the part of you that did all that hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, so I think too, the memories of what you thought would be that didn't come to fruition,
Mm-hmm.
and so like you said, 2025 is the 9 year, the year of the nine, years of completion, and ending, year of all the stuff that we have worked so hard to achieve, so that we can go to the next step. We're
Yeah.
planting new seeds for new beginnings for 2026, the year of 10, new beginnings, and I don't
Mm,
know
I
how much,
love that.
right? And it's exciting in a way,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't have to completely abandon your grief and be like, oh, that's wrong.
No. Mm-mm.
Right? It's more or less, I grew and learned from this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do I accomplish my next chapter or begin my
Mm-hmm.
next chapter? You know?
I will say I have over specifically like the last year, and it's just because 2023 was my grandpa's end of life journey that my family and I had encountered and walked on together. And we were so I was a primary caregiver with my mom and he lived with my mom and we were on call, specifically me, because I left my job at the time to help them take care of him because we wanted the best care for him and I literally like this was like my life purpose, coming to fruition was helping him transition. And we were so wrapped up in his complicated healthcare that we did not give ourselves, I did not, I'll speak for myself. I did not give myself the time and space to grieve. Like I accepted very early on in his journey that we were going to lose him, just I don't know when. So I accepted it very early and I just cherished my time with him. And ooh, the grief's coming up. And like this past year, without him, we lost him in October of 2023. And I spent 2024 trying to work through the grief of losing him, the grief of like the changes in our family dynamic, the grief of like losing my grandma even, back in 2020 and just like how everything kind of changed. So I spent a lot of time with my grief in 2024 and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. It's
Yeah,
very dark sometimes if you allow it to be. It can be very lonely and it can be very isolating, and I found comfort in it. And it took me a very long time to do that. And I don't think I would have grieved as healthy as I did if I didn't have the tools that were exposed to me prior to this loss. And this is where I think, the meat of our podcast, and for the vegans that are listening, for the tofu of our podcast, like the coping skills, I was not brought up with coping skills, and grief
no.
started pretty early on for me. I was not consciously aware of it, and
Mhm.
the people I was around growing up didn't really talk about death and dying and like grief and things like that. It's
Yeah.
very taboo even in today's society. I mean, I think it's a little bit more normalized and it's becoming more normalized. But I was not brought up with coping strategies. I learned some in talk therapy when I was in that at an early age for various different things. I learned a lot more throughout my yoga teacher trainings and like my spiritual practices and like the little communities and stuff that I've been through. And then um, I think it really truly prepared me for 2024 to like work through not just the grief of losing my grandpa in 2023 and my
Yeah.
grandma in 2020, but also like I've lost two jobs in 2024,
Yeah.
which financially hit me pretty hard. Um, so I was grieving that. I was grieving not being home for the holidays this year. That was really, really hard on my inner child. And then
Yeah.
just going through different relationship changes and like trying to make friends out here now in Colorado, totally different state, and it's winter time and like just grieving all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I would be like as cool, calm, and collected as I seem, if I didn't have
Yeah.
stuff. So I want to pick your brain, like you going through your own grief journey on various different things. Like, what tools have you been introduced to? What has helped you? what have you been introduced to that maybe hasn't helped you, but maybe, for our listeners, maybe it would help
Yeah.
them. It sparks their interest. What sort of things have helped you?
Well, the number one thing I want to express here is that I have grown up around that. And I have grown up around the idea that life continues after that. Like I said, I've been a medium my whole life, which I
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew but didn't know. But that's a whole nother story. But like I remember when my great grandfather passed at 8 years old. I remember looking up. I'm doing my hair, getting ready for the funeral, and I'm looking up, and there he is, right there, praying over me. And I thought, wow, I was like, I'm so excited. I'm going to tell everybody. Some people were looking at me like I had three hugs. Other people were like, oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's their own personal experiences from
Mm-hmm.
childhood, like you had mentioned too. But it's the physical loss that hits you hard. And like I said, trying to find out who I am without this person and
Mm-hmm.
trying to know the love that you have for these people. Where does it
Mm-hmm.
go? How do you handle that love? How do you handle
Yeah.
that? So what I have done, and I do want to bring this up too. I was 5 months pregnant when my dad passed
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, unexpectedly, so I never really got to fully grieve the loss of my dad because my mom was so upset. Those are like soulmate, her true love from high school, and
Oh.
she was so lost. The light went out in her eyes, and we had,
Mm.
I had her and I had this baby. I'm trying to prepare for the baby, all that stuff. Well, then my mom passed away 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
My kids were, we were like toddlers or kindergarten age, and by that time, and I realized at that point I didn't grieve my dad. So I
Mm.
had the grief of both my parents at that same time, and it was so
Oh.
hard on me. And it was unhealthy coping mechanisms where you're not making the right decisions, you're not
Mm-hmm.
saying the right things, you're kind of going off the deep end.
Yep.
And it really helps if you have that support system that
Mm.
don't judge you or be like, okay, hey, or maybe be like, hey, you need to pull in a little bit, or you know what I mean? So it really does help to let people know what you're going through and
Mm-hmm.
to accept it. That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms that can hurt you in the
Mm-hmm.
process. And I want to tell you guys that it happens. It's okay. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you can pull yourself from that situation or whatever, you go through the loneliness you have mentioned. You go through the memories of, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that, which would lead to guilt or
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But there's also memories to remember of love, all the good times, all
Yeah.
the tradition. You know what I mean? So it's perspective. How do you want to be remembered them? How do you want them to
Mm-hmm.
remember you? We know life continues, it's not the end of the end. But
Mm-hmm.
the physical part is ending. You
Yep.
see what I'm saying? Okay. So due to that, I wanted to mention that I felt like it was important. We have confusion, we have denial, anger, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of anger, of things not spoken, things left undone, all of these things.
Oh
My
yeah.
parents never met my daughter. My dad never met any of my kids. So there's that
Mm-hmm.
anger where she loves them.
Yeah.
So you got that, and then so how do you deal with that? Well, how do you make that into a positive coping mechanism? So the one thing that I've started doing with some of my clients is I tell them to get garden wax, those little river wax,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
and decorate it, put
Okay.
it on their own land. or I'm sad or I'm mad or all these things, these feelings of grief that you have, and
Mm-hmm.
put them into like a bag of some kind. And you lift that bag, it's heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the next time they're starting to feel the feeling, go into that bag and take a rock out. Take another rock out. Leave some of them blank because maybe you don't know what you're feeling. So you take out
Mm-hmm.
the blank one. That bag's a little bit lighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's put this to good use. Let's put these garden rocks into your yard or in the park. Or go put them somewhere where they're pretty to look at,
Mm.
but they're not in your grief bag anymore.
I love that.
That seems to really help a lot of people. You know, it really seems to give them an idea of, wow, I'm carrying all this around and I'm so heavy all the time. Well,
Mm-hmm.
no wonder you're holding on to it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you let that go? You
Well, I was
know?
gonna say that's a beautiful, creative expression way of letting go of those big emotions and things like that. You're feeling those emotions, whatever they may be. You're thinking about how those emotions are making you feel. So now you're taking your hands, transferring that energy into, painting the rocks or
Yes,
whatever, and then to ground yourself, when you're feeling that way and you take the rocks out, you're putting them in nature. So you're
yes,
grounding and you're
yes,
exchanging that energy with the earth. The earth is going to take that sadness, anger, discomfort,
yes,
XYZ, whatever, you name it. They're taking that as you're setting that rock down and then you're grabbing joy. Like how
yes.
beautiful is that?
Isn't that beautiful? It's a transmutation of that
Mm.
negative into a positive. But I do want to say too, I'm not disillusioned or illusions or whatever that word is,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
where grief is just gonna go away. It
Right.
is always gonna be here. We're always gonna carry it, but it's how we carry that grief that
Mm-hmm.
matters into
Not all.
healthy habits,
I was gonna say not only carry it, but how we express it, I think
Yes.
too is the biggest thing. Yes, we can carry it, we can lay it down, but once we lay it down, is it going to be a healthy lay down? Are we just
Mhm.
placing it there with love and intention that it's gonna, heal and transmute into something beautiful, or are we throwing it down because we're sick of it? Like
Yeah.
got to do it with love because grief just wants to be heard and held, I think.
Yes.
And the only way that you're really going to truly feel peace with grief is if you
Send
send it
that love.
love.
Yeah, and that's really what we're here for. We have to
Mm-hmm.
send all experiences with love.
Mm-hmm.
And that help that transmutes all the yuck of
Yes.
everyday life, the
Yep.
yuck, right? I will say too, I have had, obviously I just talked about my parents, and I have had a couple of miscarriages and, stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
what I have done, I planted a rose bush in
Mm.
honor of my parents. And then next to it, a little bit further away, I have a lilac bush in honor of my kids that I miscarried.
Oh, I love
So,
that.
on a nice weather day, I'll go out there with my coffee and just spend time with them.
I
Because
love
when
that.
I see those plants, I'm reminded of the love that we have for each other.
I love that. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I know somebody who has an apartment or something, and she just has this little plant that she puts on her kitchen table.
Hmm.
She has coffee with them every day.
Nice.
So it's a nice little love behind her.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And and my mom had, when my dad passed, my mom had, well, one of her friends had taken my dad's, he worked flannel shirts all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and she made them into pillows for
Oh,
my
that's so funny.
kids.
My family did that when my grandpa, well, my mom did that for the family when my grandpa passed because he also wore flannels.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
had a million of them. And she's like, well, let's not like have them all go to like donation or whatever. So I actually have his pillow on our bed in
Oh,
the van. Yeah.
yeah, and I know some people make them into teddy bears or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always ways to honor them so that they're still around you. I mean, they are always around us.
Yeah. And you have to too, like, they're always around us. I feel like when I was deep in my grief, and I was not open to hearing things and seeing things and whatever. So I feel like when you're so deep in those heavy feelings, you kind of, in a way, maybe, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. Like you close yourself off to feeling that love because you're just letting that sadness, that grief, that anger, that denial, whatever those big emotions are, you're letting that, kind of overcome that love shining through so that you
Yeah,
can actually feel it. I mean, even a year later, now that my grandpa's gone, like there's a lot of times that I'm like, Grandma and Grandpa, where are you? Like, why am I here
yes.
by myself? But
Oh
then, like,
yeah.
I'll find a quarter on the ground. Like, the quarter is my grandpa was very big into collecting quarters, and it was
Yeah.
like his thing. So like that's his sign for me. Or I'll find a little penny, and like that's my sign for my grandma, and her name was Penny. And so like
Oh
I'll find those things. I'm like, okay, I know you're here. I just can't feel you. And it's
yes.
again, there's a part of my inner child. If you go back and listen to our inner child podcast, I talk about how from a very young age I shut all of that down, and I was like, I'm not feeling any of that. And I think there's still a little part of me that like in especially moments like I'm not trying to feel anything, just let me be in my own lane, in my own
Yes.
energy,
And
and just do
that is
it.
so healthy to feel that. I'm glad that
Hmm.
you do that. And see, I'm glad that you acknowledge that grief now because you don't want it to come back 5, 10, 15 years later because it will hit you 3 times as hard as it
Yeah.
does, if you're not working through it now.
Oh
Trust
yeah.
me, I know. Trust me. It is
Oh, I do too.
the hardest, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say here other than it's just acknowledge that grief, go through it,
Hmm.
try to deal with it in a healthy way, especially since you're aware of it, how unhealthy and healthy ways,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
and not everybody does it, but some people do,
Yeah.
especially if they don't have like a support system around them. They just want to feel something other than that
Oh
grief,
yeah. Let me tell
so
you.
yeah,
I went through my like early adolescent, teens, majority of my like early adult life. I had so many unhealthy coping strategies. I'm
yep.
almost embarrassed to like think about it because I'm like, oh my gosh. But I just never was shown the proper tools of how to deal with the grief, the anger, all of those emotions that come with
Yeah,
grief. And
yeah. And
I'm
I was
just, go ahead, go ahead.
no, 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 I'm sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
I was always taught, the spiritual side of it. I was never taught the
Oh,
physical
that
side
too,
of
yeah.
it. And it
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of like, well, what do I do with this? You kind of go off the deep end. I mean, some people anyway, but
I definitely did.
yeah. So and nobody's here to, well, I'm not here to judge. You're not here to
No,
judge.
no, definitely
Mm,
not. I am the last person to
never.
judge you. Mm-mm. I've
Yeah,
done some
no.
things that I'm like, I hope nobody judges me. I know people are, but that's why I don't judge people because, hey, I've been there, done that, I'm sure.
And there's that whole thing we need to talk about in another podcast. This whole thing about living two lives at the same time.
Ooh, good one.
The
Yep.
negative part of us, this is my outtake on it, is that the negative parts of us that do the unhealthy things is so that we
Mm-hmm.
can understand others who are going through things to help bring them back to the light, to integrate all of it, to not judge yourself. It's just come from a place of love. Love the
Mm-hmm.
grief, love the path that you find. Whether you do or not, send that love anyway because it's all coming together
Yep.
to integrate the two lives, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know
Hmm.
if that makes sense. It's in my head, but
No, I think it makes sense. Yeah.
okay. And it's just it's hard. It's not easy. It is a very hard topic, emotion to go through.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I'm proud of you for,
Thank you.
well, you don't hide it. You don't put up a
No.
mask, which a lot of people will put up the mask and be like, whoa, which is another thing that I have done with some of my clients. We'll make masks, and it doesn't
Okay.
have to be anything. I know one client went to the Party City store and bought a whole bunch of different masks
Cool.
and put one on for the public that they're false out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm fine. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. I'm doing good. Blah blah blah. When you take off that mask, look in the mirror and speak your truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not okay. I am grieving. I am sad. I'm mad. Whatever it is that you're feeling or whatever, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of that is to integrate the two so that you don't have to put that mask on.
Mm-hmm.
Let people see you. Let them see that you're hurting. You never know who's going to reach out to you for help. Or maybe you're going through that so you can help somebody else. You see what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So there's a whole concept behind that.
Oh yeah, I believe that 100%. And like I look back on like my journey and all the things that I have been through, all of the grief that I've been through, the highs, the lows, and I wore a mask for a very, very, very long time, but that was just because of my upbringing. My
Yeah.
parents were very big on, sorry, family. My family, specifically my dad, but my family was big on like outwardly appearances
Yep.
and
Mine
putting on the
too.
happy face and nothing is wrong and everything is great and
Yeah.
like growing up Catholic and going to CCD, the religious ed, and going to church every week and you
Yeah.
know, doing beautiful things like the soup kitchen every year with the church and things like I loved those things, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but like to go through life and being told like you have to put a mask on so people one like you, but then two so then people think that you're happy, so that they're like jealous of you or whatever, like I don't know what the motive was. I never understood it.
Yeah.
And so from a very young age I learned to put on the mask, and I think as an adult now, like I might be a little sad you don't like me because I just think I'm pretty cool. Like,
You
I don't know. I think
are.
I would like to be my friend, but
Definitely, yes.
at the same time I'm like, well, it's your loss. Like if you don't want to be my friend, that's okay. Like I think I bring a lot to the table. And
Right.
before I would have tried to fight for, your approval, your friendship, your whatever. Like, okay, if you don't
Yeah.
like me, like, yeah, I'm a little weird. I have hippie tendencies. I like all the new stuff. Like,
Yeah.
but then also I'm very much human and I enjoy the humanly things.
Oh, yeah.
I just think too, like there's a lot of people that like to wear the mask just because to not wear the mask is very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
space people do not want to be in, no matter what emotion or
No.
whatever circumstance they're going through. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I can't be strong anymore and I'm gonna need help. And in order for me to ask for help, I'm gonna have to take off this mask and put my pride and my ego down
Yeah.
and hope that you give me grace and unconditional love that I would give to you if you came to me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I try to create that space I would like to think I create that space for people, just because I wanted that so bad growing up. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I understand that completely. I've always felt like I've had to hide myself because I've
Hmm.
made so many people in my family uncomfortable. Because I was
Hmm.
raw. I was raw. If I was gonna
Sure.
cry, felt like crying, I was gonna cry.
Hmm.
My friend, the very few friends of mine, at that time that I still have now will tease me and be like, man, you were something else as a kid, and but it was just like, well, why wouldn't you support each other? Like, I never understood it. Where
Yeah.
now it's like because it made other people uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's too vulnerable, and
Hmm.
then they attack you and you're the outcast. It's the whole thing, and
It's
I'm
like all
sure
projection too. Yeah.
attraction. Yeah, but then the
Hmm.
other thing you have to realize, people's reactions of you have to do with them. It has nothing
Yep.
to do with you. And once you realize that, wow, what a whole nother world opened up for you.
Yeah, I read a quote and I don't know who it's by. I mean, it's floating around on the internet, so I'm sure you could look it up. But it's like people only meet you at the level of consciousness and awareness that they have met themselves. So,
Yes.
like, if there's
Wow,
something
yeah.
that you are triggering them, you're triggering them because they have not met themselves at the level that you're like vibrating at or whatever. Like, that
Yeah.
was like the concept that I read into, and I was like, huh.
Oh,
That is pretty interesting. And then it just gives you a different perspective. There was also another quote, um, I think it was Ram Dass, but it was like, I go out into nature and I sit and I observe the trees and I don't judge the trees for the way that, it sways or the way that the branches are broken. I just observe it and I'm happy that it's a tree. And like, that's how we need to look at humans. And
yeah.
so, like, being
Yeah.
on the grief journey, being on the healing journey, being on the self-love journey, being on the forgiveness journey, whatever journey you're on, just realize, it's not necessarily about you. Sometimes it's just people projecting onto you, and it may not be healthy, but you'll feel that in your soul that you're not in alignment with whatever that is. I don't know if that really
Exactly.
ties into what we were talking about, but I felt like I had to say it, so I did.
No, no, it makes sense because when you're saying all these different journeys too, the key is to send it love. That's
Hmm.
really what it's about. If you can love the journey you're on, no matter what it is,
Hmm.
whatever type of journey it is, because it's going to bring you to that period of personal and spiritual growth.
Yeah.
And that's really what this is about. It
Oh,
really
yeah.
is. All of it.
I
It's
will say.
oversimplified, but
Oh, totally. And it's way easier said than done,
yeah,
like all the things that we talk about, meditations and healing
yeah,
sessions and, all the things or whatever. It doesn't just, um, I don't want to say cure things, but for lack of better words that I can't think of right now, it's not going to help like change things overnight. Like it's a practice. It's a practice for a reason.
yeah,
So just going through acknowledging the emotions and then finding something for you to express that in a healthy, maybe even creative nature, will help you elevate to that ultimate unconditional love that we're supposed to be, providing out into the world.
yeah, absolutely. And
Hmm.
oh, I love this. I love this. That's how this has really come full circle here. And there was something I wanted to say here, but it completely left my brain. But I
Maybe
just
because it's for
wanted
another podcast.
maybe, maybe. But Ashley, it's always a pleasure. I am so grateful that we found the time today
Me too.
to do this. And I don't know, for all you listeners out there, please let us know how you deal with
Hmm.
your grief, how you what you have found works for you, and let's start a discussion. And if you would like to be a guest on our podcast, reach out and we will talk about it and see
Yeah,
where it goes.
cool.
Yay. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ashley. Till
Thank
next
you.
time.
Until next time.
Bye.